Hi, welcome. In a previous video, we talked about classifications and classification attributes. Today, we're going to take a little look at the long description that exists inside your CMMS or EAM and why it's really not a great idea to utilize that as your end-all be-all to dump information. So inside your CMMS or EAM system, a lot of the fields that exist will have an ability to expand that field to a long description section. And you can typically type a very long paragraph or a whole bunch of characters in there, depending on the type of field. I know, for example, in Maximo, it's a CLOB field, so it's a large object field. In some databases, that's just a memo field, so it allows you to put in hundreds of characters, as opposed to a standard record number that may have a limit of 40 in case of SAPPM, or maybe 75, or whatever the case may be, depending on your system. The long description allows you to put more information. And as users on the back end of this, or on the front end of this actually, we tend to take the easy road. And so if we have, say, an inventory item and we're not quite sure where to put specific character attributes, our first inclination, if we haven't had really good training in the system, is to dump that into the long description. And so we type in things like the shaft size or the bearing number, or some inside diameters and outside diameters. We start putting information into this long description. And if you watch our video on classifications and attributes, it talks very specifically around what those are and why you should be putting that information in there. In this video, we're going to take a little look at exactly how you get data out of a long description table and why it's very difficult. So in most CMMS or EAM systems, the long descriptions are captured in a single table. So it doesn't matter if you're at the inventory record, the work order. Everything that you can expand on and put into a longer description exists within one table. And that table uses unique identifiers to know where to go to get that, to get that information from the long description text that you typed. So for example, if in the inventory item master or material master record, at the description you've run out of space and you want to expand on that, or you haven't used classifications and you want to put a bunch of information in there, you click the little arrow that's to the right of the field and you get this long description space and you type all that in there. That exists in a field called long description text or long description or whatever the system's calling that. It's associated to your item master or your material master or the item, and it's the description field that it's linked to, and essentially it has a record number. That all gets stored inside the table that houses all this information. And so inside whatever the EAM or CMMS is calling the long description table, there is some field that says this is the text that exists. This is what George typed in the inventory record. There also exists something that references it back to the table. And so there's a reference back to the item master or material master table. There's another reference that asks for the column or the field name that was associated to the long description. So this is the field that you click next to in order to bring up the big expansion. And so in this case, it's the description of the item. But this could be the long description text associated with a job plan task, the long description text associated with a PM description, an assets description. There are lots and lots of fields inside your database that allow you to type a long description, and it could be any of those. There's then some unique identifier key that references the record ID or the record's reference number. And so there's a link between the actual record, the field, the table, and then the text that was typed. Now, if you want to pull this data out of the system, so we've used our item number and we said, okay, we put a frame size for a motor in there and we put the horsepower and some other things, and now we want to try to find items that have that information. The query you have to write to pull this out is extensive. You essentially have to say, get me that text or whatever that string is in quotes from the LD table where the LD text has this in it, and the item, the owner table is item, and the owner column is description. And then you can leave this one out if you're going to search for anything that has it, or if you're trying to specifically say, give me the long description information associated with specific record, you would put the specific record information in there. As you can tell, this is already tedious enough. Now you have to add on to that the fact that this table houses every long description. Okay, so if you think it's extensive to just pull that data out and write the query, think about how much information sits inside of this one table. For every asset or equipment record that you have, every place that you can expand a long description, there are records in this table. For every work order that you have, for every work order task that has a long description, you have a record in this table. For every item number, for every inventory record, for everywhere in your database that houses a long description sits inside this one table. So if you think you've got a lot of records in the work order table, try searching this one. It's not very good in terms of its response rate, right? If you're trying to write an efficient query, using this table isn't how to do that. In addition to that, you're not really getting any analytical capability. So if you're using classifications, you can search, show me all the equipment that have a classification of frame size this, or attribute of frame size this, and you can get that back. To try to search this to find all the motors that have a specific frame size because you've put that in the long description is a very exhaustive query and not a very quick responding query. And so it's very difficult to pull the information. It's very easy to do that from the classification system. So essentially, this is kind of how long description is likely structured inside your system. And while it is good for the system to manage it this way, it's not very good for an end user to take advantage of and to build analytical capability. So my recommendation would be that you use the fields that exist that can house this information. And if those fields don't exist, check to see if your classification attribute system can then utilize that and store the information in an area that makes it easier to get the data out of it, or at least to do any type of analytics. Awesome. So that's our quick overview of long descriptions inside your CMMS. Have a great day.